Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Today's talk dedicated to someone who has captured the hearts of many. A man with many titles, celebrated in the East and West, with a lot of dispute about him and authenticity regarding his works, yet an ocean of knowledge. He is Shaykh al-Akbar Muhyiddin ibn Arabi radiyallahu ta'ala an wa quddisa sirruh. The very recent popular Turkish serial of Ertugrul has perhaps acquainted many a people now with this Gnostic. And perhaps I will not be able to do justice to him, inasmuch as it's been done in the depiction in the series. And perhaps the director of Ertugrul visited our dhikr so that he could imitate it in his series. Yet, this personality is of great interest. I want to try not to delve into explaining his teachings, those that are sometimes confusing, because for that you need someone who is eligible, who has license to do so. I don't have license to do such. And if I can't explain, I'm sure you won't be able to understand. Having said that, we'll begin with something about his life, an incident, before going into the details. And this incident is like an epitome of his life, where he had those who championed him and called him a Shaykh al-Akbar, the greatest Shaykh. Titles like Sultan al-Arifin, the Sultan of the Gnostics. Titles like the Khatim al-Wilayat al-Muhammadi, the seal of the sainthood of this ummah. Amazing titles, lofty titles, not given to anyone other than him, unique to him. Yet you have people who gave him titles unworthy of him and considered him to be an irreligious person. Each to their own, and perhaps more sure actually, each will only speak about him in what they understand from him. Those who fell short in understanding his words, then they will speak from their understanding, and those who felt that they understood would champion his meanings. He was given a title of the ocean of meanings that has no limit, that has no shore. This was Muhyiddin ibn Arabi radiyallahu ta'ala an. A beautiful incident that's attributed to him is as follows. That he, in his neighborhood, there was a sheikh, a scholar, who did not like, was not too fond of Shaykh Akbar, spoke ill of him. And he fell ill, the sheikh fell ill. So the Shaykh al-Akbar went to visit him to pay his respect, to see how his neighbor is. So he knocked on the door, and his wife, the sheikh's wife, opened. And he told her that I've come to pay my respects, see how your husband is. If you may ask him, can I enter? She went and told her husband, it is Shaykh al-Akbar ibn Arabi who's come to the door. He said, tell him to go away from here. He has no entry. I don't meet irreligious people. He's better going to the church. So the lady came out and she said, my husband doesn't want to meet you. And he says, you're better off going to the church. Meaning you're not a religious man. You've left the deen. Waliyadu billah. So the Shaykh al-Akbar, he thanked her and he said, because your husband is an upright man, he's not going to give me counsel that's not of benefit. So I take his counsel, thank you, and I make my way to the church. So he made his way to the church. Very humbly he enters. He takes his shoes off and sits at the back. It so happened the priest was giving a sermon. During the sermon, as the Christians would do, the priest says Jesus is Son of God. So very respectfully, the Shaykh al-Akbar stood up and he spoke. And he said to the priest that you've made a lie against God and you've made a lie against Jesus. He's not the Son of God, he's the messenger of God. So a debate started between him and the priest. And this debate continued and to no end until the Shaykh al-Akbar said, that picture on the wall, the picture of Jesus that you have, ask him. Address the picture. Ask him if he is the Son of God or not. So the priest said, no, this is stupidity. How can a picture speak? So the Shaykh al-Akbar said, the one who made a baby speak, the one who gave birth to, the one who gave Maryam a baby, Sayyidah Maryam, a boy without a father, can make a picture speak. Turn to the picture, ask the picture. So the priest, now ashamed in front of his audience, he turns to the picture of Jesus in the church and he says to the picture, Jesus Christ, speak, are you the Son of God? And lo and behold, by the power of Allah, the picture speaks. And the picture says, no, this is a lie attributed to me. I am the messenger of Allah. And I only gave you glad tidings of Ahmad, the final messenger. So the audience, seeing the picture speaking by the karama of the wali, they all embraced Islam. So he took them out of the church. They're still in their clothing. And now they're walking towards the masjid. So here there, Ibn Arabi walking through the city with the whole audience, the congregation of the Christians, heading to the masjid, and they walk past the house of the Shaykh who had fallen ill. And the Shaykh is looking, observing what's happening here. So the Shaykh al-Akbar greets him and thanks him, saying, had you not given me this advice, these people would not have been guided to Islam. Thank you. This is the Shaykh al-Akbar. He is misunderstood, but a great man of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with many a secret. That's something of his beginning, or in his middle life. Something of his beginning and his end, and then we go into some details, inshallah. And I hope that these incidents will paint a good picture, if you already don't have a good picture, of who this personality is. His father was a Sufi master, was a saint, excelled in fiqh, excelled in hadith, although he worked for the government, and working for the government at that time was not considered to be a praiseworthy act. Anyway, his father, on his travels back, he stops in Baghdad. And it was the time of Al-Ghawth Al-A'zam, Shaykh Abdul Qadir Al-Jilani, radiyallahu ta'ala anhu. So he comes to visit Shaykh Abdul Qadir Al-Jilani and he says to him, pray for me that Allah gives me a son. So Al-Ghawth Al-A'zam, Shaykh Abdul Qadir Al-Jilani, enters into a muraqabah. And he looks at the Lawh Al-Mahfuz. And after his muraqabah, he says to the father of Shaykh al-Akbar that there is no child for you. I have seen the Lawh, there is no child for you. This is a story that's been attributed to the beginning of the Shaykh's life by great saints like Shaykh Abdul Karim al-Jili, and then more recently, like people like Mir Ali Shah Sahib, who was considered to be the champion of Shaykh al-Akbar in Hind. Something we'll speak about a bit later. Allah knows best to the authenticity of this account. The account follows as he says to Shaykh Abdul Qadir al-Jilani to make dua for me, and the Shaykh says back that there's no son for you. But he continues to persist. He continues to persist until Shaykh Abdul Qadir al-Jilani enters a muraqabah once again, and then he lifts his head and says that permission from Allah is such that if you join, lock your back to my back, then Allah Ta'ala will give you a boy. So they locked their backs, and lo behold, he was given a boy. And Shaykh Abdul Qadir al-Jilani told him to name him Muhyiddin, the reviver of the religion. a title that is specific to the Shaykh himself, to Shaykh Abdul Qadir al-Jilani. This is where they say the title Muhyiddin ibn Arabi came from the Muhyiddin Abdul Qadir al-Jilani radiyallahu ta'ala anhu. So that's something about his beginning. And about his end, he passes away in Damascus, and he is celebrated in Damascus. But Damascus underwent changes, and a new leader, a new reign came with new scholars that were close to this leader, and they considered the Shaykh al-Akbar to be a heretic. So they destroyed his grave and made it disappear. Shaykh al-Akbar had foretold this event. And in one of his works, he said, when the seen shall enter the sheen, the grave of Muhyiddin will appear. When the seen shall enter the sheen, the grave of Muhyiddin shall appear. He was speaking about himself, Muhyiddin. And it so happened that his grave disappeared. And then later, when Sultan Salim from the Ottomans entered into Sham, Damascus, he met the ulama of Damascus who told him about this news that has come from the works of the Shaykh al-Akbar. He understood the seen to be himself, Salim, the sheen to be Sham, and he went to the place where his grave was, and he dug up his grave. Now, why did his grave get desecrated? Is because it is reported that his death came after an announcement that he made. He climbed a hill and he called out to the people saying, "The God you worship lies under my feet." And people took out the sword and they killed him, they gibbeted him. So Sultan Salim asked to be taken to that place. And when he went to that place where he stood and made that statement that the Lord that you worship is under my feet, he had it dug up and they found gold. What he was alluding to was not Allah waliyadhu billah. He was alluding to your object of love is gold. Sultan Salim then took the gold and he used that wealth to redecorate and make a shrine of the maqam of Shaykh al-Akbar Muhyiddin ibn Arabi, which today is still standing at the Mount of Salihiyya, at the Mount of Qasiyun, at the bottom of Mount Qasiyun in Salihiyya, and a place visited by all. And many of us who have spent time in Damascus would find that this place is a soothing, calming place that they would visit, people would visit for years on end, and it continues to be the practice today. So the beginning of the life of the Shaykh, there's a miracle, and the end of the life of the Shaykh, there is a karama. In the life of the Shaykh, there are many anecdotes, many encounters, many a miracle. With this in mind, inshallah ta'ala, we begin with some biographical information about his life. Shaykh al-Akbar was born in 560 after Hijrah. He passed away 635. He lived for 75 years. He was born in the same year that Shaykh Abdul Qadir al-Jilani passed away. He was born in Ramadan, the 17th of Ramadan, on a Monday. His father, Ali bin Muhammad, as I spoke earlier, was a pious man. His grandfather, Muhammad, was a jurist, a qadi, and a great scholar. His great-grandfather was known as Arabi. The word Arabi was attributed to this family because they were of pure Arab descent. And they came from the famous Arab Hatim Tai. This is why you find after his name al-Arabi, al-Hatimi, al-Ta'i. But he was born in Murcia in Spain, Andalus. So he's a Spaniard. his family had moved over to Spain when the Muslims overtook that part of the world. But he was of pure Arab descent from Hatim Tai, and his family became known as the Arabi family. His mother, it is reported that she was also Arab, but also reported that she was from the Berber tribe, and they were of honorable people who were hailing in the northern Africa regions, the Berber tribe, and from the same tribe comes Imam Abu al-Hasan al-Shadhili. Shaykh al-Akbar Muhyiddin ibn Arabi, born in Andalus in Ramadan, he spent the first 35 years of his life in the East. He then spent the next 5 years in Mecca, which is the pole, and then he spent the next 35 years of his life in the West. That's how his life was divided up. 35 years in the East, 5 years in Mecca, and then 35 years in the West, 5 years in Mecca, and then 35 years in the East. Every step of his way was under a command that he said he received from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The first 8 years he lived in Murcia. Born into a pious family, like children would do, he would study Quran, memorize the Quran by the age of 8, and he visited two saintly women in Murcia. One was by the name of Yaseen, and one was by the name of Fatima. The account of Fatima, Lady Fatima, is more well known that she was in the 90s. And she would say that from all the people who visit me, the most beloved to me is Ibn Arabi. He was a young boy, not 8 by this time. And she said, the reason why I love him more than all is because when he comes, he enters completely. When he sits completely. That is to say, he doesn't leave his heart and mind elsewhere. He is full of presence. When he is with me, in whatever work that he may do, I have most love for him. And Ibn Arabi would call her his mother. At 8 years old, the family moved over to Seville. And this is where he now spends the next 27 years of his life. The youth of Ibn Arabi was spent in Seville, where he then visits Fez and Marrakesh in Morocco and comes back to Seville. But his main life was spent in Seville, and this is where he hails from. When he comes to Seville, known as Ishbiliya now Seville in Spain, very early on, he starts to have encounters with the unseen. And this is where the beauty of Shaykh al-Akbar comes. Shaykh al-Akbar says about himself that people only come to God after they've made their suluk, their journey to Allah. I, however, was pulled by God to him. So what people would achieve after many years of hard training, coming to the threshold of the pleasure and ubudiyya of Allah, Shaykh al-Akbar says, I, from my ignorance, was taken to the presence of the Lord. So the unveilings came to me at a very early age. He speaks about his unveilings. And he says that this is before he was 15, so when he was a young boy. He says, I went to the house of a wealthy man. He invited us all. So I went, and while food was being served, a goblet of drink was given to me. And when I took the drink, enjoying the party, I heard a voice say, Muhammad. His name was Muhammad, kunya was Abu Bakr. Muhammad, we've not created you for this. He said, I shrieked, I dropped the glass, and I left the house. I came outside, and I found the porter, the guard. He was a poor man with some not so clean clothing. I exchanged the clothing that I had with him, and I went into the bewilderment. I found a graveyard, I found an open grave, and I sat in seclusion for 4 days alone. The only time I would come out was for the 5 daily prayers. He said, then I went back to my home, to my father, and I told him what occurred, that I heard this voice and a state overcame me and I was made to go and spend time in seclusion and worship. His father, who was a master, understood very well what his son is now experiencing. Shaykh al-Akbar mentions about his early days and said, I had no teacher at this time. I had no shaykh, no guide, when I was being pulled by Allah to himself. He said, my first guide at this moment was Sayyidina Isa alayhi salam. He said, I saw Isa alayhi salam in a vision. He spoke to me, he embraced me, and he told me to follow his path of zuhud. He then mentions later in the Futuhat Makkiyah that in my early days, I had a vision, and my early teachers are Sayyidina Isa alayhi salam, Sayyidina Musa alayhi salam, and Sayyidina Muhammad Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. He says, I see a dream, or I see a vision rather. And in this vision, I see Sayyidina Isa. And Sayyidina Isa, as you know, was the most ascetic of prophets. Sayyidina Isa said to him, I give you my asceticism, my zuhud. He met Sayyidina Musa. Sayyidina Musa, as you know, was the one who had knowledge from God. So he said, Musa said, I give you ilm ladunni. It's given to you. And then he says, I see Sayyidina Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam, and Sayyidina Rasulullah says to me, follow me and you shall be safe. Follow me and you shall be safe. He said, these were the first three people who I encountered on this journey of mine. He also mentions later on in the Futuhat about his early experiences that he went into a seclusion for 14 months. This is before he's 15. And he had many openings, many unveilings. He was able and he received knowledge from God directly that people did not have in that age. At a young age, before hair had reached his face, he had no facial hair this time, Seville became well aware that there is an enlightened soul amongst us. This news started spreading like wildfire, and it reached to the neighboring town like Cordoba. Cordoba, at that time under Muslim rule, had a qadi, had a judge. The judge was none other than the famous philosopher Ibn Rushd, who was considered to be the master of his time in fiqh, usually not quoted, but he was a master jurist in the Maliki fiqh, but he was a philosopher. He was holding the chief justice position of Cordoba. He was a friend of Shaykh al-Akbar's father, and he had an interest in meeting the Shaykh al-Akbar. So his father, this is the father of Shaykh al-Akbar, knowing that his friend wants to meet him, he sends him for some job to Cordoba and says, go and meet Ibn Rushd, he wants to speak to you. So the Shaykh al-Akbar, who's 15, has no hair on his face. He says, I go to visit Ibn Rushd because of his desire to meet me. He says, when I enter into his room, he's an elderly man. Ibn Rushd is very famous at this time. He's a chief justice. He says he stands up out of respect and he embraces me with a lot of love and kindness. And then he sits me down smiling, and then he says to me, now Ibn Rushd, you have to understand, is a philosopher who is a master of the outer sciences. He has proven existence of God, reality of truth by the intellect. But now he wants to meet a young boy who has become enlightened by Allah. So he says to him, is it true? Is it true? That's all he says. And the Shaykh al-Akbar says, yes. He's 15. And as soon as I say yes, the Shaykh al-Akbar says, Ibn Rushd becomes overwhelmed with joy. Overwhelmed with joy. And when he became overwhelmed with joy, I realized now what he was intending. So I said to him, no. So what was he intending? He was intending that, is it true that the knowledge I have is the knowledge you have? So he said, yes. But Ibn Arabi was understanding, is it true that your knowledge and my knowledge is concurring with your knowledge? So when Ibn Arabi realized that Ibn Rushd has become overwhelmed with joy because of what he has thought my yes to mean, I said no. And as soon as I said no, Ibn Rushd started to tremble. And he started saying, La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. And his first face turned pale. And the reason why this expression came was he became fearful that is what I believe, not the truth. So then he asks the Shaykh al-Akbar, who's 15, young boy, and he says to him, what I know, is that concurred by what you know? The knowledge you have been inspired with, does that concur to the knowledge I have acquired? So the Shaykh al-Akbar said, yes and no. Ibn Rushd said, explain. He said, in between the yes and the no, the spirits leave the bodies. That is to say, yes, you have acquired correct knowledge, but to get to the knowledge I have got, your soul needs to leave the body. You have to enter into the realm of the unseen in order to be able to understand the level of knowledge that has been placed onto my heart. You are unable with your intellect to be able to acquire, this is not his word, but this is what's understood. You are unable to acquire the knowledge via intellect that I have acquired by the unveilings Allah has poured onto my heart. This was the only meeting that's been recorded between the two. And Shaykh al-Akbar said, I left thereafter and I had desired to meet him, but before I got to meet him, he returned to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So these were the early days of the Shaykh al-Akbar with a lot of unveilings, a lot of knowledge being poured onto his heart. Although now he's achieved the pinnacle of what you would want from suluk, he was now made to take the journey. So he went out looking for a master until he finds his first Shaykh. His first Shaykh is known as Abu al-Abbas. Some said Abu al-Hasan, but more well known as Abu al-Abbas, and then they disputed over the ending of his name. Anyway, Abu al-Abbas was a man of great asceticism, a man of great zuhud, and a man of great openings. So Abu al-Abbas took him in, and Abu al-Abbas was expecting the Shaykh al-Akbar. Once, whilst they were together, and the Shaykh al-Akbar was under the tutelage of Abu al-Abbas, a discussion came on the person of the Mahdi. Who is the Mahdi? Abu al-Abbas, he pointed out to someone in his own circle that that person is the Mahdi. The Shaykh al-Akbar, he responded to his teacher by saying that I have certainty knowledge given to me from the unseen that he is not the Mahdi. So he was young, 20 years old at this time, the Shaykh al-Akbar. So he objected to his teacher. His teacher, Abu al-Abbas, did not like the objection. The Shaykh al-Akbar, not realizing what he's done, he stands up and he leaves. On his way out, he's going towards home, he meets a very beautiful man. The man stops him and says to him, go back to your teacher and submit to him. So he says, I recognized immediately what this meant, that I've done wrong to my teacher. So I came back to my teacher. As soon as I entered, my teacher said to me, must I send Sayyiduna Khadr every time you object to me? So the Shaykh al-Akbar said, oh my master, was that Sayyiduna Khadr? He said, that was Sayyiduna Khadr. So the Shaykh al-Akbar thanked Allah. Sayyiduna Khadr, you know, is the individual who Sayyidina Musa alayhi salam meets in the Quran, and they have a journey together. So he says, praise be to Allah that in whatever circumstance it may be, but I got to meet Sayyiduna Khadr. That was his first encounter with Sayyiduna Khadr. He has further encounters as we go along. So he says to his master, I submit, although it will be as I have said. I submit, although it will be as I have said. What did he say? He said that person is not the Mahdi. Later, Abu al-Abbas was given knowledge that he was not the Mahdi. And he said to Shaykh al-Akbar, you are correct, that he was not the Mahdi. But the beauty you find, and the whole life of the Shaykh al-Akbar is in meanings, his subtleties, was Sayyidina Khadr sent him back to submit, because that was the job of the Shaykh al-Akbar as a student, to submit to the Shaykh. The Shaykh al-Akbar then says to his teacher, when his teacher admits his mistake or comes to recognize his mistake, the Shaykh al-Akbar said, my job was to submit because what you said did not deal with the Sharia. It was not the Sharia that was being changed that I had to object to you. On any other matter, the job of the disciple is to submit to the master. These are the beginning days between the Shaykh al-Akbar and his teacher. Later in life, the Shaykh al-Akbar moves to a different place and he writes a letter to Abu al-Abbas, his teacher. And in the letter he writes, and he says to his master, the Shaykh al-Akbar now has gone beyond his teacher. He says to his teacher, look into your heart and think of me and ask me any question. And I will look into my heart and think of you and answer your question from the heart. So you are where you are, I am where I am. Whatever question you have, concentrate on your heart, keep me in your mind, and I shall give you the answer. A few days later, a letter came back to the Shaykh al-Akbar from his teacher. His teacher said to him, I had a dream. And in the dream, I saw saints sitting in a circle. And amongst the saints, there were two people. I recognized one, and the other one, his face was veiled. And he was an Andalusian. And a voice said that one of these two will be the qutb of this time, will be the pole of this time. A verse was recited of the Quran, and both of them fell into sajda. Then the voice said, whoever lifts his head first, he will be the qutb. So the master says in the dream, the Andalusian lifts his head first. Then I asked to see the face of the Andalusian person. The veil is removed. Muhyiddin, it was none other than you. So this is the kind of teaching and meetings and discussions that are taking place between the Shaykh al-Akbar and his teacher. The Shaykh al-Akbar now comes to Cordoba, and when he comes to Cordoba, he has a dream. Now he has a vision, and he has a set of visions. These visions are preparing him for a certain end. The Shaykh al-Akbar's teachings can be summed up in three. He has three simple teachings. Much more, but if we want to condense them. The first of them is the purity of Tawheed. His whole life was dedicated to the oneness of God. Tawheed of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. From this came forth the concept of wahdatul wujud, the oneness of being, which is not understood and understood by some and not for others. But in simple, there's nothing simple about wahdatul wujud, but looking at the examples that the Shaykh al-Akbar himself gives, he explains the existence of God and the existence of everything else similar to the existence of a thing, a being, with its shadow. And he says the shadow has no real existence. It exists as an extension to the thing, to the real. That is to say, the only real is Allah, everything else is non-existent, i.e. existent only by the power of God and exists like a shadow compared to the real. Meaning that everything is a manifestation of the sifat of Allah. A small meaning of wahdatul wujud. That's one meaning that he came forth with. The second teaching he had was, in order, you have tawheed of God, you have the oneness of God, now we need ubudiyyah to him. You need to serve Allah, you need to worship Allah. And who worships Allah the best? He now terms this as al-insanul kamil, the most perfect human being who is able to worship Allah in the best way, and able also is the cosmos inside him. he has a theory, the Shaykh al-Akbar, about the cosmos that we see outside, what we see, and the cosmos that's found in a human being. So he talks about the individual who carries the cosmos inside him and worships Allah the best, calling this title Al-Insanul Kamil, the perfect human. He termed this Al-Haqiqatul Muhammadiyya. He placed and he said, the only one truly able to worship Allah in its perfect form and contains the cosmos within him and all perfection in a human being is none other than Sayyiduna Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And then the third thing, and these are his visions that he speaks about, is the seal of sainthood. The seal of sainthood. And he says that at the end of his visions, Allah granted himself, the Shaykh al-Akbar, this seal of the sainthood of the awliya of the Ummah of Sayyidina Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. This concept we'll explain shortly, inshallah, when we talk about his visions, that what does it mean by the seal of the sainthood of the awliya of this Ummah. When he comes to Cordoba, he sees the first vision. The first vision, he sees all the messengers and all the prophets, from Sayyidina Adam alayhi salam to the final messenger, Sayyidina Muhammadun Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. He sees them all. Then one of them come to him, or he addresses them rather, and he says to them, or he addresses the Shaykh al-Akbar, he gives salams are exchanged. The Shaykh al-Akbar asks him, who are you and what is this meeting? The person says, this is a gathering of all the prophets and messengers, and I am Nabi Hud alayhi salam. So he says, I conversed with him, and I asked him, why have all the prophets and messengers come here? They said they've come to visit a certain man. That certain man was the Qutb of that era who departed from this world a few days thereafter. So these were unveilings that were given to the Shaykh al-Akbar that other people like myself, like ourselves, are usually covered from. Thereafter, he moves to Tilimsan. From Cordoba, he moves to Tilimsan. When he comes to Tilimsan, he finds a saint. He speaks to him. His name was Tartusi, Shaykh Abdullah Tartusi. While speaking to him, that Shaykh said a few unkind words about Shaykh Abu Madian al-Ghawth. Shaykh Abu Madian al-Ghawth is one of the heirs of Shaykh Abdul Qadir al-Jilani. He is one of those people who spread the Qadiri way and the teachings of Shaykh Abdul Qadir all over Africa. People like Imam Abu Hassan al-Shadhili are indebted to Abu Madian al-Ghawth. He is the teacher of Abdul Salam ibn Mashish from one root. And he's the teacher of the teachers of Shaykh al-Akbar. He was alive in the time of the Shaykh al-Akbar. He lived in Cordoba. The Shaykh al-Akbar had never met him. But the Shaykh al-Akbar had fallen in love with him. The Gnostics of Seville always spoke about Abu Madian, that we have what we have, but the epitome of wilaya is with Abu Madian al-Ghawth. But he never got to meet him in the physical realm. One day, when in Seville, Shaykh al-Akbar says that after praying Maghrib, an intense feeling came to my heart. I must go and visit Abu Madian. He said, as soon as this feeling came, few moments later, a man turned up. I recognized this man. He was a wali, a saint. The saint said to me, I have come from Abu Madian to give you salam. The Shaykh said, when were you with Abu Madian? The saint said, I was with him just before Maghrib, and I've come to you now. The distance between them was 15 days travel. He said, Abu Madian al-Ghawth said to me after the Maghrib prayer that the Shaykh al-Akbar, who's young, who's in his 20s, has a desire to meet me. Go meet him and say our souls are connected. So this wali came to tell the Shaykh al-Akbar that Abu Madian al-Ghawth says our souls are connected. That was to say that we're not going to meet in this temporary realm, and they never met in this temporary realm. Now when the Shaykh al-Akbar comes to Tilimsan and he meets the Shaykh had said a few bad words about Abu Madian. When he hears a few bad words, detest and hatred enters the heart of the Shaykh al-Akbar for this wali. He comes back home, he goes to sleep, and he sees the Messenger of Allah in his dream. You have to remember, the Shaykh al-Akbar is a man from the unseen in this temporary world. There's not anyone like him. He is unique, extremely unique. So he sees this dream, and the Prophet says to him, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, why do you have hatred in your heart for Shaykh Abdullah Tartusi? So the Shaykh al-Akbar responds to the Messenger of God saying, alayhi salatu wasalam, that he says bad words about Abu Madian. So the Messenger of Allah said to him, does he love Allah and His Messenger, meaning me? And the Shaykh al-Akbar says, yes, he loves Allah and His Messenger, meaning you. So the Prophet says to him, then why don't you love him for loving me and Allah? You could hate him for hating Abu Madian, love him for loving Allah and loving me. So the Shaykh al-Akbar apologizes. He wakes up the next day, he makes his way to Shaykh Abdullah Tartusi, informs him of the dream and gives a gift. Shaykh Abdullah Tartusi accepts the apology, begins to cry and realizes that actually it was himself who is mistaken. The Messenger of Allah is removing an obstacle from his heart in not thinking bad about Abu Madian al-Ghawth. This was an encounter that took place between the Shaykh al-Akbar and this wali of Allah. Thereafter, he moves to Tunis. Now, when it comes to Tunis, he is about to embark on a journey overseas. So he stops and he makes a dua to Allah that I don't want to embark on this journey until you show me my ending and the ending of all those who shall follow me. So he says, Allah Ta'ala showed me my ending and all my stations that I shall achieve, and the people who shall come after me, who shall follow me, who shall be in love with me. Later on, he speaks to his stepson, who is his Khalifa, Shaykh Sadruddin al-Qunawi, and he says to him, I knew of your state when I was in Tunis. When I asked Allah Ta'ala to show me those who shall follow me and their end, I knew you then that I'm going to meet you and this will be your maqam, that you shall become my inheritor. He then comes on this journey, and when he comes onto the sea, the Shaykh al-Akbar says, I feel some pain in my stomach on boat. He says, everybody goes to sleep, but I couldn't sleep. So I get out onto the deck. Whilst on the deck, he says, from afar, from the land, from afar, I see a man. And he is invoking Allah. And he takes one step into the sea. And then he takes another step in the sea right in front of me. So in 2 steps, he has traveled from a distance on water. He said, on each step, I looked at his feet and there was no wetness on his feet. So this person is making a huge step and coming to him. Then he comes to me, he greets me, speaks to me in a language that only he understood, gave me a message, and then he took 2 steps and disappeared, saying the name of Allah. He said, I realized that was Sayyiduna Khadr, who I met last time when I was going to my Shaykh. This was the second encounter he had with the Shaykh al-Akbar. After Tunis, he then comes back to Seville, where his father was. His father fell ill. The Shaykh al-Akbar is now 30 years old. He'll come back to Tunis. He's become famous now to Seville. He's become well known. People have his greatness has spread far and wide. That there is a person who has unveilings, who has kashaf, who has knowledge that you can't achieve from books. So his father, who was a great man, told the Shaykh al-Akbar that I'm going to die very soon. Told him of the day. On the day that he was going to pass away, his father was very ill. His father sat up and he told his son, I'm going to depart from this world today and I'm going on a journey to meet Allah. So the Shaykh al-Akbar said to him, may Allah make this journey easy for you and make your meeting with God beautiful. The father became happy at the dua of his son and was pleased with him, made dua for him. On that day, he departed from this temporary world. The Shaykh al-Akbar, now that his father passes away, his mother passed away also, either a bit earlier or a bit later, he had 2 sisters. Both were not married. So he now decides to leave Seville with them, and he makes his way to Fez. And this is the first time that he comes to Fez. When he comes to Fez, he marries off his two sisters to some pious people in Fez. When in Fez, he has a vision. In the vision, he sees that a group of Muslims termed as the Muwahhidun, these people had overtaken Seville now, Murcia, pardon me, that they are in battle with some Christian army, and they are going to defeat them. Keep in mind the Crusades is taking place in the background at this moment in time. So he gives this news that the Muwahhidun will overcome this Christian army, and a few days later, as he said, the Muwahhidun overcame the army. He then comes back to Seville, his hometown, stays there, well celebrated. People honored him. He stayed with the saints, studied hadith for all of his life, and had a lot of spiritual encounters with people there. Thereafter, he returns back to Fez. This is his second visit now to Fez. When he comes to Fez, he sees another vision. In this vision, he finds that the whole existence disappears. Dimensions disappear. The wall in front of him, the floor beneath him, the ceiling above him, everything disappears. He disappears from himself. And he comes under the arsh of Allah. And he recognizes this to be his spiritual enlightenment. At that moment in time, he asks Allah Ta'ala to show him the qutub. So in the dream, he sees the qutub, the pole. The qutub that is shown to him is actually someone who was accompanying him, but as a lover. So the next day, when the Shaykh al-Akbar went out and met the awliya of Fez, they were all seated. They would all speak, but everyone came to listen to the Shaykh al-Akbar. He would speak, and everybody else would listen. And even if they commented, they said, "What do you have to say?" Meaning they leave the matter to him. That individual that he saw in the dream, the qutub, was also seated there. But he was seated like a commoner, someone who's a lover, not as the Shaykh. Now the discussions continued until the discussion came on the qutub. So the Shaykh al-Akbar said, "Today I will tell you information about the qutub that nobody knows." And he looked towards that man. And the man said to the Shaykh al-Akbar, "Please tell us of what Allah has told you, but don't reveal the identity." Nobody knew other than the Shaykh and the qutub what they're speaking about. So the Shaykh al-Akbar speaks about the qutub without revealing the identity. So everybody leaves and nobody knows the qutub is the qutub. When they leave, the qutub comes to him. And he says to him, "May Allah reward you for enlightening us all, but not revealing the identity of the qutub." The qutub is still not saying, "I'm the qutub." And the Shaykh al-Akbar said, "It must be so." And then that qutub disappeared and they never met again. At this moment in time now, the Shaykh al-Akbar sees another dream. This is a very important dream that he sees. He sees a dream, and in this dream he comes to understand that every saint is on the step of a prophet, on the foot of a prophet. Every wali will take something from a prophet. And he realized then that his teacher, Abu al-Abbas, was on the step of Sayyidina Isa alayhi salam. This is why he was the most ascetic of all people. But the greatest wali will be on the step of the greatest prophet. That is Sayyidina Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam. At that moment in time, he came to realize that he will also be on the step of a messenger. And he knew it's him, but he didn't see in that dream. But this was the second dream that he saw that speaks about the walis being on the steps of saints. Then he sees another dream, which he calls a vision. He writes a whole book on this called Kitab al-Isra. He has the Mi'raj that Rasulullah had, sallallahu alayhi wasallam, in the spiritual form. The Mi'raj of Rasulullah was in the physical. He has the Mi'raj of Rasulullah in the spiritual. So he ascends to the first sky and the second and the third, meeting the same prophets and having discussions with them. He documents all of this, my spiritual journey, he calls it, Kitab al-Isra, in this work, documenting everything that he sees on the way and the prophets that he met and the discussions that they had. This was known as the spiritual ascension of the Shaykh al-Akbar. At this time now, Abu Madyan al-Ghawth passes away and the news reaches him that his favorite master has passed on. They never met, but he always addressed him in the Futuhat as my master and someone that he considered to be his teacher. Thereafter, he returns to Seville. He comes back to his hometown to meet the masters and bid farewell. Then he comes to Cordoba and Ibn Rushd passes away. So he attends the janazah of Ibn Rushd. Then he comes to Murcia, his birthplace, and he bids farewell to the people in Murcia. He then makes his way to Marrakesh. When he comes to Marrakesh, he has another vision. In this vision, he sees the Arsh of Allah with nur pouring down. He comes under the Arsh, and a voice tells him, you must make hijrah to the east, east, and take Haras with you. Muhammad Haras, he was a wali, who is in Fez. The Shaykh al-Akbar wakes up from Marrakesh, he makes his way to Fez, and he finds Muhammad Haras waiting. So they both leave and they come to Qahira to go towards, not Haras, Hassar, pardon me, to go towards the east. When they come to Qahira, his friend Muhammad Hassar passes away. And he now intends to go to Al-Makkah al-Mukarramah. He is now 35 years of age. The 35 first years of his age in the West have been spent. He is now making his way for the first time to Makkah al-Mukarramah. He first goes to Bayt al-Maqdis. He spends time there. Then he goes to the place of Sayyidina Ibrahim alayhi salam. He goes into seclusion there. Then he comes to the Rawdat al-Sharifa of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam in Madinatul Munawwara. He has a seclusion there. He's picking up secrets as he goes until he comes to Makkah al-Mukarramah, to the Kaaba al-Musharrafa. When he comes there, he sees the third vision. The third vision tells him that he is the Khatam of the Wilaya. He sees the Kaaba in a vision, and the Kaaba has bricks of gold and silver, and it is beautiful. And he walks around the Kaaba, but he sees that there is a space for two bricks, a gold one and a silver one. He says, I transform into two bricks and I am put into the Kaaba, and the Kaaba is now complete. I am then told that I am the seal of the awliya of the ummah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He speaks later about this in his diwan that he writes when he's in Damascus. And he says, I am the khatam of the wilaya of the ummah of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But he says this is a specific wilaya and not a general one. For as for the last wali of this ummah, it will be Isa alayhi salam. Because Isa alayhi salam will come back as a Nabi, but also as an ummati of the Messenger of God, thus attaining wilaya from the ummah of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. This Khatamul Wilaya, although there's not clear explanation from himself as to what this means, what's alluded is that every wali will take from a prophet, and each prophet has a zahir and a batin. And the one wali who is taking, the last wali of this ummah, to take from the Messenger of God sallallahu alaihi wasallam from his zahir and from his batin in perfection will be myself. This is the meaning of Khatamul Wilaya. From Makkah al-Mukarramah now, he decides to get married. And he says, before this time, I was never interested in marriage, but I get married to a lady by the name of Fatima. He also sees another dream. In this dream, he is told to author. He's been authoring along, by the way. He's authored over 500 works. But he's now told to author a work which he titles Futuhat Makkiyah, the Meccan revelations, or the Meccan openings. So he writes whilst in Mecca the first chapter. Futuhat Makkiyah is in 37 volumes. It has 560 chapters. And he has detail on everything related to the religion. A major section in there is about the end of times. And he speaks about the Mahdi and the Armageddon and Isa alayhi salam coming. And many a knowledge that is passed between ulama is from the Futuhat Makkiyah of the Shaykh al-Akbar. He then, after Makkah, whilst in Makkah, he meets a person by the name of Najmuddin al-Kubra. Some said Majduddin, but Najmuddin. He becomes his best friend. And now Najmuddin accompanies him for the next 20 years. Najmuddin is important because he was working with the Seljuk state before he came to Makkah. So he says to Shaykh al-Akbar, let's go now to the Seljuks in Konya. And he had also worked in Baghdad. So they first make their way to Baghdad. And when in Baghdad, he meets the Khalifa by the name of Nasir there, who welcomes him. And he goes to visit the disciples of Shaykh Abdul Qadir al-Jilani and spends time with them. Thereafter, they make their way to Mosul, where he sees a dream, followed by the Wali, the Qutb of Mosul, handing over the khirqa, the robe of the Qadiriyya, to the Shaykh al-Akbar, which actually comes from Sayyidina Khadir alayhi salam. Thereafter, he moves to Konya. When he comes to Konya, the Sultan, who is the Sultan of the Seljuks at that time, welcomes him, gives him a huge reception, honors him, gives him a huge house, and he stays with the Sultan for a period of time in Konya with his friend Najmuddin Kubra. Now this Sultan is not the Sultan you see in Ertugrul. This Sultan is most likely his father or grandfather. His name is Sultan Keikaus. Most likely his father or grandfather. It's he that was very closely linked with Ibn Arabi, and they lived together, and he honored Ibn Arabi, and Ibn Arabi had a major influence upon the Seljuk state. Thereafter, staying there for 9 months, he continued writing. The Shaykh al-Akbar and Najmuddin Kubra, they make their way to Malatya, which was not far from Konya, and was the birthplace of Najmuddin Kubra, and he stays there for a good period of time. After 3 years, he decides to go for Hajj again. This time he goes to Damascus. It's the first time he ever visits Damascus, and this is the place that he's going to settle in for the rest of his life. He makes his way to Jerusalem again. Then he comes to Hebron, where Sayyidina Ibrahim alayhi salam is. He comes to Cairo, and he gets criticized by the scholars, and they get the leader to imprison him, that he's become a heretic. So inasmuch as he's famous, spread far and wide, he's got his fair share of friends and his fair share of foes. But one of the scholars of Cairo pleaded to the Khalifa and let him out free, and then he made his way back to Mecca. When he came to Mecca, after another vision of seeing the Messenger of God, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he actually started authoring the Futuhat Makkiyah on the last visit to Mecca. What he authored, he left on the Kaaba. Now when he comes back, he finds the same Futuhat on the Kaaba. He took this as a sign that there's acceptance from Allah on this work. So he continues to write the Futuhat Makkiyah. After from Mecca, he makes his way to Baghdad. Here he meets Sheikh Shihabuddin al-Suhrawardi, the Imam of the Suhrawardi way, and there's an encounter between them. Thereafter, he moves to a place called Siwas, and when in Siwas, he sees a vision. In the vision, he sees that the Sultan Keikaus, the Sultan of the Seljuks, will have victory in Antioch. 20 days later, it so happened. He wrote to him. 20 days later, the Sultan had victory in Antakya. Thereafter, he returns to Malatya, the birthplace of Najmuddin Kubra. Now, what's interesting here, he is now 55 years old, is at this same time, Maulana Jalaluddin Rumi, his father migrates from Balkh and makes his way to Konya also. So you have Rumi coming to Konya, and you have Ibn Arabi coming to Konya or Malatya nearby. And there is a suggestion that they met. But when they met, Maulana Rumi was young. He was 8 years or 9 years of age. And when they met Ibn Arabi, who was 55, he commented about the father and the son. This is Maulana Rumi Jalaluddin and his father Bahauddin. He said about them that this is an ocean, meaning Jalaluddin Rumi, led by a lake, meaning his father. That his father is a great master, but nothing like the son. This was the encounter that is reportedly taken place between Maulana Jalaluddin Rumi and the Shaykh al-Akbar. Thereafter, the Shaykh al-Akbar moves to Aleppo. When he comes to Aleppo, two important things happen. One, the Sultan of the Seljuks dies, and then his son, Kayqubad, who you guys may well be familiar with, takes over. And his best friend, Najmuddin Kubra, also passes away. So now he makes his way back to Malatya, the birthplace of his friend, and he marries the widow of Najmuddin Kubra to take care of her, and adopts his son, whose name is Sadruddin Qunawi, who becomes his inheritor and becomes a very close associate of Maulana Jalaluddin Rumi. And these two people, Sadruddin Qunawi and Maulana Rumi, were the major people that influenced Konya in their lifetime. They lived similar lifespans and they died months from each other. Thereafter, the Shaykh al-Akbar decides to come to Damascus, and now he settles there and stays here for the remainder 15 years of his life. He is now 60 years old. He is well celebrated in Damascus, and the scholars far and wide come and visit him and honor him, and the Khalifa there also honors him very highly. Shams Tabriz is also mentioned to have visited the Shaykh al-Akbar, who is the teacher of Maulana Jalaluddin Rumi. And then here he continues to write the Futuhat. He has a vision at the end of his life of the Prophet ﷺ giving a book to him, saying, go and spread this far and wide. And that book is now known as the Fusus al-Hikam, which is a book that is difficult to read and difficult to understand and must not be touched without caution. Then in Damascus also, the Shaykh al-Akbar has a dream of all his disciples and his spiritual sons that shall come after him, who shall promote his way in legacy and would love him. So all those names were shown to the Shaykh al-Akbar. Later, when he turned 75, he passed away in Damascus. He was buried, and then you know the event of how one of the accounts is that he died, and this is one of the accounts. He died because he said to the people, the Lord you worship is under my feet, so they killed him. Later, when Sultan Salim came, he found his grave, dug up that place, found gold, understood the illusion, and then he built a shrine around the grave of the Shaykh al-Akbar. The Shaykh al-Akbar himself, if you look at their lives, the history that's mentioned about their date of birth and passing, it becomes very unlikely that he actually met Ertugrul. Very unlikely. Allah knows best. If there's someone who has history and knows better that there's an encounter, then excellent. But what it seems like is the Shaykh al-Akbar, Sadruddin Qunawi, and Maulana Jalaluddin Rumi were the pioneers of an intellectual, spiritual thought in Konya. The Seljuk Empire finished, but the Shaykh al-Akbar had spoken about the coming of a new empire. So there is a work title known as Shajaratun Nu'maniyya li Dawlat al-Uthmaniyya. Now, whether this work is correctly attributed to the Shaykh, or the work is the Shaykh al-Akbar's, but the title is placed later, which is more of a possibility, yet in that work, the Shaykh al-Akbar speaks about Uthman, not by his name, but by his characteristics. That a leader will come, a young man described him. He shall start an empire that shall stay for long, and this empire will fulfill the prophecy of the Prophet ﷺ in the Fatah of Constantinople. This is why the Ottoman Empire always saw themselves indebted to the openings and revelations, to the kashf of the Shaykh al-Akbar. His teachings were always adopted in the Ottoman Empire. And the Shaykh al-Akbar's third student down, this is Sadruddin Qunawi's grand student, was appointed as the first teacher in the official Ottoman Empire. And the Ottoman Empire, the Shaykh al-Islam of the Ottoman Empire at a particular time had it passed by the Sultan that you cannot criticize the Shaykh al-Akbar. And anybody who does must be spoken to. And it must be explained to him how great this man was. So the Ottoman Empire was indebted to the Shaykh al-Akbar in that he foretold in an empire that is going to come. As for the physical encounter between him and Ertugrul, then this is most likely not true. Other than the remarks and teachings and the statements of the Shaykh al-Akbar, they most likely are very correctly attributed to the Shaykh al-Akbar, which he has deep meanings, as you can see and read from his works. That is an overview of the biography of the Shaykh al-Akbar. I've only highlighted places that he visited with some encounters. But if you look deep into his life, then his life is full of diamonds and emeralds and beauty, with spiritual encounters and spiritual openings, especially related to the meanings that he took of the Quran. One of the most delights that he himself found was the unveilings and the new meanings Allah poured into his heart on the tafsir of the Quran. And you find this a lot in the Futuhat Makkiyah. I end with this one account of a teacher teaching fiqh in a madrasa. And whilst teaching, the discussion was on what is a heretic. So one of the students said, a heretic is someone like Ibn Arabi. So the teacher said, that is true. The teacher then, a few days later, had a gathering at home with the same students. So the student said to the teacher, we're not going to leave until you tell us who is the greatest saint of all times. So the teacher said, the greatest Shaykh is Ibn Arabi. So the student said, how can this be? You called him a heretic in the madrasa, you're calling him the greatest Shaykh here. He said, there I was speaking as a jurist. Here I'm speaking as a man of love. And this was the Shaykh al-Akbar. His words sometimes confuse people, very esoteric language that was made purposefully for elite and certain types of people who could understand him. He is to be honored and respected as he has been celebrated by the greatest imams of this ummah. He's also been criticized by many. And till today, it happens to be that you find people praising him and others giving him other titles. The general position of Sunni Islam is we regard him as a great saint, a great man of Allah with great openings, yet the lay people are told to stay away from his works, especially the Fusus al-Hikam, so that people do not fall into misunderstandings. With this, we ask Allah Ta'ala to accept what has been said. Apologize, I do, if there was too many facts and it becomes difficult to follow on. But it would not have been due to him if I couldn't at least speak about the span of his life. He traveled a lot, as you can see, and had great openings. And if you are interested, then read The Quest for Red Sulfur. It's an excellent work, but just be careful not to take Aqidah from such a text, especially when it's a translation of a biography with a lot of insertions by the translator and the translator's opinions. So one needs to be very careful. Otherwise, it gives you a beautiful insight into the life of the Shaykh al-Akbar.